right. Well, good morning or good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're actually watching this recording. My name is Travis Gapehart. I am the junior and senior class counselor here at Providence High School. I know previously this spring we did have a college info session held in the morning, and I had planned on doing another one this spring, but in case I don't get around to that, wanted to make a recording just so people who weren't able to make it to that meeting could have all the information, or people that did come to that meeting could maybe come back and refer to some of the things that we covered back in March. A lot of good information for you here today, whether this is your first time going through the process or if maybe this is your last child who's gone through. Hopefully there's some good information for everyone, regardless of where you're at in the process and regardless of your exposure to this process. Like I said, for first time parents going through it or veteran parents alike, hopefully this is helpful. Um, so depending on when you're watching this, some of these dates may not really pertain any longer. Today is actually Easter Monday here at Providence, so students are not here at school, but faculty and staff have some in-service events and some other meetings taking place. Here at the end of the month in April, we'll have junior and senior prom on May 1st. That'll be an e-learning day. I believe that's Oaks Day. And further into May, the first couple weeks are really comprised of AP exams, so a lot of our sophomores, juniors, and seniors will be busy with those. Hopefully they don't have two on the same day, but sometimes that obviously happens, depending on what courses they're taking. Then there at the end of May, you can see when the final exams will be for juniors and all other underclassmen. Just to kind of throw some stats at you as we get started here. I kind of like to start with some of this information first. Not always the most positive, but sometimes I think it's good to kind of be rooted in reality and kind of see what the numbers are telling us. So as we know, transferring colleges is very normal. Happens quite a bit, not just within the athletic dimension, but also traditional students as well who are non-athletes. We find that almost 40% will transfer colleges at some point. An even greater number to look at is the one to the right of that, the amount of students that will change their majors at least once, sitting at 80%, which should not be all that surprising. You know, a lot of our students don't have a ton of exposure to different careers to really understand what they are like day to day. So it, it's perfectly, you know, plausible to understand that our students will change their mind at some point. I think we've all, you know, personally kind of been down that road as well. The plan we have in place may change by the next year, so that's fairly common as well. The 24% stat, it's a little bit of a loaded statistic there. We're just saying that the amount of students who will start at one college and actually finish at that same college in 4 years is only 24%. So obviously, when a student transfers, that hurts that percentage. And you know, a decent amount of students are not able to finish in 4 years. Maybe they have an extra semester or two that they have to take care of. So that number is very low. And if any of you are doing any college visits, maybe you've seen a 6-year graduation rate kind of be the typical statistic that they're now publishing, which should seem kind of odd that we're looking at 6-year graduation rates instead of 4 years. But that's kind of the way that the admissions world has been trending. Student loan debt, we hear about it in the news all the time. All of us have different varying degrees of connection with this stat, whether we ourselves had a loan debt, maybe some of us are still paying that off. But at any rate, if we look at Hoosier students in particular, the average amount of loan debt is about $33,000, which, you know, doesn't always mean much to our students who don't really have you know, any type of conception of what money really means, what a budget means. But you know, if we look at modern interest rates and we look at that $33,000 average, you know, over the course of the 10 years after a student graduates, that's about, you know, $350 or so each and every month, which is comparable to, you know, a car payment. But for students, maybe that doesn't mean a whole lot. There's some other stats there. I think the last one's kind of can be a bit shocking. You know, young adults 18 and 34, we see that almost a third of them are still living at home with their parents. And that could be for a variety of factors. Obviously, housing and rent prices are getting higher and higher all the time. Going back to that student loan debt statistic we talked about, maybe students aren't able to, afford to live on their own yet because they're paying back student loans. Um, but but yeah, just some interesting stats to get us started here today. And over the course of these meetings, I get a lot of questions. Over the course of those discussions about, what about this college? How does this work? Or, which colleges require this? And so the biggest thing I can always say, and it's going to get kind of old hearing it, but it depends. So every college is slightly different. So it's really hard for me sometimes to give an umbrella answer that's going to work for every single college because they all have different deadlines, different requirements. Some require an essay, some don't. Some need multiple letters recommendation. Some colleges don't accept any letters recommendation. So once again, as we get started here today, you may hear me say it depends at different points during that discussion. Also, kind of get us started, I'd like to kind of go over some guiding principles. And I hope none of this comes off as preachy, but just in my years of experience as a former college admissions counselor and now in my 6th year as a school counselor, I've been through this process with a lot of families. So these are just some things that I've picked out that might be helpful for you. But first and foremost, I kind of start with the point that students should really take the lead. So at this point, a lot of juniors, have not had a whole lot of responsibility given to them. Some have for sure. But I think what we all want to try to do is give more responsibilities to these students as they go through senior year so that when they show up as a freshman on campus, they're not completely overwhelmed by things. So the more we can start kind of handing over to them in terms of responsibilities, that even, looking at simple things like doing laundry or cooking a meal, everyday, life skills, the more we can kind of start handing over to them, I think it's really going to help them be successful when they make that transition into college, which, that transition, no matter how well prepared a student is academically or socially, college is just a different environment. So it takes some students some time to get acclimated to that. So once again, the more skills, that we can give students, more responsibilities, that's going to ultimately be more helpful for students in the long run. We always like to say, it's not my quote, it's one from a former National Association for College Admissions Counseling president. They said, "This is a match to be made, not a prize to be won." So really what we're looking for is a good fit for students. We're not trying to get into the most prestigious school, the highest ranked school. It's great if a student can do that. I know that's exciting, but at the end of the day, my goal for a student is to find them a school that's going to be the best fit for them, that's going to meet all of their needs, where they can really thrive. So that might be a school, prestigious school on the East or West Coast. That might be a school down the street, here locally. So, we're not so much worried about getting into that prestigious school. We're more worried about how can we find the right institution for my child. Yeah, it's important for all of us and families alike to think about, all 4 years of college, not just the getting in. To be honest, the getting in part for a lot of schools is kind of the easy part. The most important thing, probably the most difficult thing is, okay, can we afford this? Can we finance this education? And does this make sense for my child's ultimate career goal? If they're looking to go on to graduate school or medical school, we really kind of have to think about the entire experience for undergrad and beyond as well. So that's important to remember. I also remind students that going to college is not just an automatic, easy thing to do. That still, in today's society, going to college is still a great privilege that they should really take advantage of and value that education. Even here in America, if we look at adults, 18 to 25 or something like that, we only see about 30% of them actually have a bachelor's degree. So the fact that usually around 90% of our students are going on to get that bachelor's degree, we always want to remind them of how incredible that privilege is to get that education and to have that opportunity. Um, so that always puts things in good perspective, I think, for students. So we try to remind them about that. Especially if we look at worldwide, I mean, that statistic of people having a four-year degree dramatically goes down once we leave the United States. Keep your blinders on. This is great for students and parents alike. I always use the analogy of horses that have the blinders on. It's very easy to kind of get distracted and maybe even spooked by things going on around us. Our students sometimes will get some anxiety when they hear about other students doing a ton of college visits and they've already done this, that, and the other. And parents, we hear that same kind of thing. Well, this parent over here, they just hired a private college counselor. They're spending thousands of dollars on this private counselor to help their student go through this process. And then now I feel like I have to also be doing the same thing to give my child the best opportunity possible. And while that's admirable and we all want the best for our kids, it's easy to get caught up in all of this, and it can really make things difficult and unnecessarily complicated for ourselves. So I always tell students, all of you have a God-given path, a plan for you, and so no two plans are going to look the same. So your journey is going to look completely different from the person next to you. So don't get wrapped up in what's going on around you. As far as students' roles, I'll talk about students' roles and then about your role as a parent. For students, these are kind of the things that I really harp on them. Everything you see on the screen is important for them. Going back to the last slide about we want students to take the lead. Once again, we want students to be the active participant in this process. They should be the ones doing all the work, as far as the applications, the essays, asking for letters of recommendation, getting their transcripts requested. That should not be on you as a parent. We're all there to help support the student and keep them on track as far as like staying organized and meeting those deadlines and things like that, making sure they're doing all those things correctly. But at the end of the day, it really is a student's responsibility first and foremost. Um, so, as far as like right now, if you guys are starting to do some of those initial college visits, which is really important at this phase in the process, are students setting up those meetings, those visits at colleges? When you walk into the admissions office, who's speaking first? Is it the student or is it you as a parent? The more we can get students kind of being in that lead role, that's going to work out best for everyone, I think. Some other roles for students. The first one seems very obvious, but I always remind students that colleges do track your demonstrated interest. And what I mean by that is they want to kind of put a number on each student to know how interested is this student. Have they shown that? Ways that a student could show interest is, obviously applying to that college or requesting information could be a great way of doing that. Going on a campus visit, meeting with a college rep at a college fair, something like that. Logging into a Zoom meeting, info session, something like that, doing a virtual visit. There's lots of different things a student can do to really demonstrate interest. And when it comes down to it, if a college has two students who kind of look the same on paper, but one student has shown lots of interest and the other one has really not shown any, obviously they're going to want to invest in the student who has already demonstrated a good amount of interest at that point. We also ask students to keep us updated. I always say, and of course right now, of course, with seniors, as they're making their decisions, ironically, I feel like I'm always the last one to find out, because we do want to celebrate with students. We want to kind of be in the know. So we ask that students kind of keep us updated. And, a really important thing is when students are admitted to a college or if they get a scholarship, we keep track of all that information. So you as a parent will help out with that from time to time, but we really want students to keep us updated because all that information we have to record. It'll go in the end of the year programs for senior awards night and for graduation. So we want to make sure we have all the most accurate information. But yeah, at the end of the day, we really just want to help students celebrate and we want to highlight their successes. If you've looked at any of our newsletters we put out here and there, the last page will typically show all of the acceptance letters that our students have gotten so far. So it's just a kind of a fun thing, but it's also really important for me as their counselor to know kind of where they're at in the process, where I can step in to help. But ultimately, we do want to help those students celebrate their successes. We tell students and parents alike to try to be patient because this is a long process. I've been meeting with juniors here recently, and I kind of go over kind of the timeline of senior year. And it's important to note August 1st is when applications open. They have until May 1st to make their final decision. And there's lots of things that are happening in between August 1 and May 1. So it really runs the entire gamut of senior year. This whole process does. So it's really a marathon, not a sprint. So if students are hoping to be done with the process by Thanksgiving or Christmas and they can make their college selection, it usually just doesn't play out that quickly. For example, most of us are not going to be getting full financial aid letters that really show the true cost of a college until maybe January, February, March. So with that being said, most families are going to need to see what the finances look like before making a final decision. And lastly, we also try to remind students how important it is to be grateful and to show gratitude to those people that are helping us along the way. This is something our seniors have struggled with, to be honest, the last couple of years. For example, a lot of students are asking for letters of recommendation, and as you might expect, some of our teachers get asked more often than others. And typically, it's the English department that gets hit up quite a bit for obvious reasons to write those letters. And I know one of our English teachers writes typically upwards of 50 letters throughout the fall for our seniors. And it was really distressing, to say the least, to hear from her last year at the end of the season that she did not receive one single thank you, whether that was an email, like a little handwritten note. We're not asking students to buy gift cards and stuff for our teachers writing the letters, but I think it is good to recognize that these people are taking the time and effort to write these letters. They're not just plugging it into Chat GPT. I know, like, some of the English teachers are here on Saturday mornings working on those letters in the fall. So yeah, it's really important, I think, for these students to recognize the effort and help that they're getting along the way from these teachers and other people in the process. So that's one thing we've really been working on with our students, and hopefully we're kind of headed in the right direction there. As far as the parent role in the process, kind of the opposite of that other slide where we talked about students taking the lead. The difficult part is sometimes allowing your child to take the lead, because we don't want students to make mistakes. We know this is a very important process and there's a lot at stake in terms of opportunities and scholarship dollars and things like that. But once again, ultimately, it is really helpful for students to take the lead in the process. And yeah, they might make mistakes along the way. Um, Obviously, we want to kind of be there to assist them, but I always kind of say, this is the best time in a kid's life to make a mistake. Um, Things get real, after they leave high school. There's not as much support at that point, much forgiveness in some ways. So this is a good time, if they are going to make mistakes, to do it now and learn from it. Um, Once again, be supportive, keep an open mind, be patient throughout the process. And lastly, there, probably the most important one for me in a lot of ways is, I never want a parent to go through this process feeling like they're alone, like they don't have any help. I want them to feel want you guys to feel confident about going through the process. And if there's anything you all need, I hope that you never hesitate to reach out. I know sometimes parents feel like, well, this is a dumb question. I should already know this. I've already sent 2 kids to college. Just ask. I'm here to help. I feel like sometimes I'm, um, underutilized in some ways. So please reach out if you want to have a separate personal meeting, one-on-one. Definitely let's set that up. A couple no-nos for parents, of course, and I've seen pretty much all of these happen. Not always personally, but I've seen a lot of these things happen in the process. Parents, you should not be the ones completing applications. You should not be writing essays. You should not be impersonating your child through email exchanges with the admissions personnel at different colleges. Um, and college is an important talking point. I know the constant conversation that families are having with their kids during senior year, but sometimes I think we go overboard with that. and it can really turn students off, and they can kind of just give up on it and stick their head in the sand. Obviously, there's lots of things that seniors are concerned about senior year. There's experiences, different events here on campus. It's their last year with their friends. And sometimes I really don't want to look ahead. They get a bit anxious when they think about the future. And if they're hearing about college from me all the time and from you at home, that can obviously be overwhelming. So we want to, both you and I, be cognizant of how much, weight we're putting on the college talk each and every day. It might be good just to see how the rest of their life is going before bringing up the college stuff. Even though it is a huge integral part of senior year, we don't want to make every single thing about college. Hopefully that makes sense. As a previous couple slides ago, I mentioned, our goal is really to find the best fit for your child. And so we can kind of break down fit into 4 different areas where we come up with this SAFE acronym. So S would stand for social fit, location, size, and type, and the student body. Is this a good social fit for my student? Academically, we want to make sure the student fits all of those things as far as the major. Um, does it have the program that's going to help me get to my career that I'm looking for? Financial fit tends to be the deciding factor for a lot of students, as you might expect. Can we afford this education? Does it make sense financially for us? Um, Sometimes, we have to think about, given my career path, does it make sense to go $100,000 into debt? If you're going to be a doctor or lawyer, maybe. But if you're going to be a teacher, I would say no. Let's find a more financially friendly option. And lastly, the E would stand for employment fit. So, how is this school going to help me on the next phase in life after graduation? Do they have really competitive internships that'll help me? What's their job placement percentages? What's the success rate for recent grads? What's their career, service office look like? Do they do mock interviews? Can they help me with my resume? How, you know, hands-on are they? And helping students get to that next phase after college. Because an education, a degree means nothing if you don't have the help to actually put that into use. Moving on here, looking at junior year, a lot of people are kind of wondering, okay, what should I be doing right now? What should my focus be on? So if that's you, here are some of the bullet points that I would recommend paying attention to. Overall, I would say junior year, especially spring, for me at least, that's kind of the beginning of the college process in earnest. So if you've not done anything up until this point, you are perfectly fine. Um, we look at junior year as kind of the year of discovery and exploration. So looking to seeing what our options are. No big decisions are having to be made at this stage, but it's kind of looking at colleges for the first time, exploring some of our career interests and seeing, how do I get to that career? What type of education do I need? Do I need a two-year, 4-year? Will I need a graduate level degree? So it's just kind of planning preparation stages more than anything. I do remind students, especially as I'm meeting with them right now, that this current semester they're in is truly the last piece of evidence that a college will have when they're making decisions next fall. This is the last set of grades that a college will have. Yes, they will be able to see a student's senior year course schedule, but at the end of the day, this is the last set of grades. You're really being judged on the first 3 years of high school when they're applying in the fall. Test prep is an important part of the spring. Most of our students got their SAT scores back last week, so we would encourage them to schedule a second exam, typically over the summer, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. This is also the best time for initial college visits to start doing those. Obviously, students can go back and revisit colleges multiple times throughout senior year if they'd like to see something different, see more. But for these initial college visits, this is really the time and place to be doing that. Some students might start working on their college essays, especially if they're in AP English literature. That's something they'll do after AP exams. If a student is in regular English, they'll probably be doing that in August of senior year. We've already had students do some career assessments, looking at college majors, planning for that, maybe doing some job shadowing, volunteer work, which obviously is a part of every student's experience here at Providence, getting those hours in. Part-time jobs can be something to do as well to help kind of boost a resume. As far as campus visits go, some of you have already done a few of these, but typically you want to go on the college admissions website to actually book an appointment, a visit. You can always go walk around a campus, especially if you're on vacation or something like that. But at the end of the day, booking an actual official visit is most helpful. And there's lots of things you can do on those visits. Um, Students should know about this, but they do have 6 excused absences they can use. There's a whole process for that. They'll need to pick up a form at the main desk from Mrs. Galligan, the main office, to make sure that those days are excused. And at some colleges, it could earn you money. For example, Hanover, I believe, gives you $4,000 per year that you're in college if you visit. And if you visit during junior year, that's 4,000. If you go back to Hanover senior year, you get an additional 2,000. So $6,000 times 4, that's $24,000 that a school like Hanover will give you just for coming to visit. It's mostly your private colleges that will give you some money for doing those visits, but you definitely don't want to miss out on those. So there's some good opportunities either way to learn about colleges, to maybe get some extra money and scholarships, that sort of thing. So honestly, the biggest thing for juniors, I would say right now, are campus visits. You can look online and do virtual options and things like that, but nothing can replace that in-person experience of walking around campus and getting to kind of hear about the highlights and really trying to think about, can I see myself on this campus next year? Um, so really, on-campus visits are the best thing that I think students can be doing at this stage in the process. If a student's not really sure where to begin or where to, how do I know where to visit if I don't even know what college I'm looking for? There's lots of resources out there. College Board students have looked at this. We did it with them during theology class, but they can go into a website like College Board Big Future, put in all the parameters, what they're looking for, and it will filter down results for them of schools that might be a good fit. So that would be a good option. These are a ton of other websites that students can use. Um, Niche is a website I really like. That's the picture on the right-hand side of what that website looks like. But for every college, it'll give it an overall grade based on all those different areas of campus. And there's reviews from real students, and I think reviews can be really helpful to hear from actual students what their experience was like. So those are also good websites. Another one, if a student is looking for a more traditional Catholic university, the Newman Guide will provide a good list of schools where it might be the best place for them as far as finding a community of really faithfully Catholic students, but also faculty members. They all have to take an oath to the magisterium of the Catholic Church. So you can really be confident about the Catholic education a student is receiving. Because as we probably know, there's a lot of Catholic colleges and universities out there that really don't live up to the mission of providing a Catholic education. Um, some sadly are just kind of Catholic in name only. So if a student is looking for pretty solid Catholic, a solid Catholic experience, the Newman Guide would be a great place to start. So I get this question a lot from students and families. What colleges look for? Is my child a good fit for that college? Well, one thing that's helpful is an admitted student profile. So every college will have these. If you want to go to Google and just Google the school's name and then admitted student profile, you might see something like this. So this is IU Bloomington's admitted student profile, which looks really scary to a lot of people as far as the average GPA and test scores. But it is helpful to note that at the bottom we can see IU is test optional, like more than 80% of schools are. So only about half, not even half of their students that were admitted last year were actually using test scores. So with that being said, it's going to skew the numbers a little bit and make those SAT score averages look maybe a bit higher than in reality, just because you're taking out 55% of the students uh, from the very start, since those students did not submit a test score. So admitted student profiles can be helpful. Also, common data sets. So every school publishes a ton of institutional data, and Section C of these common data sets pertains to college admissions. So sometimes they'll show you, like this graphic from Purdue, the things that they deem very important all the way to not even considered. So for example, most every school you're going to see the rigor of the secondary record. So basically, did the student take tough classes in comparison to what their school offers? GPA is also typically another of the biggest factors for every college. But then after that, you're going to see some differences between different schools on what they deem very important versus maybe not even considered. So those can also be interesting things to look at to see what each school finds most important when they're making selections. I'd mentioned retesting is an important thing we want students to try to do if they can. So June 6th will be the next, well, technically May 2nd would be the very next SAT date, but most students tend to do the June 6th test date since we're out of school. But that's going to vary based on your student schedule. If they're still doing something like baseball, season might still be going on. That might not be an option. We also encourage students to take the ACT if at all possible. Some students tend to do better on one versus the other, so we always encourage students, if they can, definitely try to take both and kind of see where things land. Financial aid, we do a whole financial aid event in the fall because it's such a huge topic that it really deserves its own program. But I just want to kind of highlight some basic things here. Some of it is probably review for you, but we see lots of terms, as you can see there. So I want to make sure we all understand what they are. Scholarships, those are, that's free money. You don't have to pay it back. Usually based on merit. And what we mean by that is like a student's academic progress, achievements, usually based on GPA more than anything. Grants, that's also free money, but it's based on need. And financial need is determined through something like the FAFSA, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, which seniors will do starting October 1st of senior year. So that will be sent to the colleges, and that determines if a student is eligible for any free money, for grants from the federal government, state government, and based on the FAFSA, sometimes colleges will also throw in grant money, possibly in addition to the scholarship. Loans, we all pretty much know what those are. Each student who files a FAFSA, every first year student who files the FAFSA is given a $5,500 loan option. Some students might be given a work-study option, so it just means they can get a work-study job on campus and work a certain amount of hours and earn up to a certain amount of money. But pretty much any student that wants to work on campus during college, there's going to be an opportunity to do that. So where does money come from? The biggest source is always going to be the institution you're applying to. So we always want to try to maximize the amount of money we're getting from the school we're applying to. The government, once again, federal and state government can help out, and that is through the FAFSA. And then we also have kind of a tertiary group of sources, and those would be outside scholarships, whether those are like nationwide websites like FastWeb and College Board, or here at Providence, we provide a spreadsheet of more local scholarship opportunities where in a lot of cases, Providence students are guaranteed to win. A certain amount of students are guaranteed to win those. So we try to do our best to keep students and parents informed of those scholarship opportunities that are taking place throughout senior year. It's important as you're doing these initial visits to kind of know understand the difference between the sticker price that you see, which is very scary in a lot of ways, versus what net price is, which is what people are actually paying out of pocket. Because typically, almost over 90% of the cases, no one's actually paying that full sticker price. So we always want people to recognize that. The FAFSA is an extremely important application to complete. We really encourage everyone to do it. I know some of you have already done it in the past with other students, older students, and you've not really found it to be helpful. It's totally up to you. It's not mandatory to do it, but we have seen that it can be helpful for students in the long run. Especially if they're looking to negotiate. A lot of private schools will negotiate financial aid, but if you don't have a FAFSA on file, those private schools will not consider you at all. Lastly, we always want students to hold off on making that deposit. That's how you commit to a college once you've been accepted. Maybe hold off on paying that money. It's usually a couple $100s. But maybe hold the deposit until you've seen the financial aid, you're 100% sure that this is the college you want to go to, because we don't want to make that decision prematurely. If you're wondering about college costs, what that might look like, we talked about sticker price and how net cost is different. If you want to know what net cost might look like, every college does have a net cost calculator somewhere on their financial aid webpage. So you can go there, put in your child's information, your income as a parent, your assets, and it will kind of shoot out somewhat of a quote that you could look at to understand maybe how much you might have to pay if your child decides to go to that college. It's not going to be 100% accurate. but I think it can be some helpful context for you as you're considering options for your child. Senior year timeline, I'm not going to go through all of this, but just kind of briefly show you August and September is really dedicated to getting started with the application process since that opens on August 1st. We want students to be asking for letter of recommendation at that point. There's different college fairs taking place. We host a college fair every September here during the school day. If a student lives in Clark or Floyd County, the Community Foundation of Southern Indiana scholarships usually open up mid-August. And that's where students can also find the Lilly Scholarship, which is, 2 students from your county is selected for that, for Lilly Scholarship, and that's free tuition at any school, public or private, in the state of Indiana. So August and September is kind of the opening round of the process for seniors. Things are pretty busy. I mentioned FAFSA, that opens up October 1st, so that is a huge part of October. Students might be retaking the SAT, might be looking for other scholarships, working on getting all their applications in, because November 1st tends to be the very big first deadline that our students look to. IU, Purdue, Bellarmine, Butler, Hanover, they all have November 1 deadline, so we really encourage students to get in early. If they see an early action deadline, to go for that. It's going to give them the best odds for admission, but also for scholarship. So November 1 is a huge day that we observe here for our seniors, and we want them to have everything turned in by then, if at all possible. You kind of see what's going on in December, making sure they have all their applications in. They might start getting some of those decisions back in some cases, making sure their FAFSA is done, doing those thank you notes for teachers, expressing that gratitude as we talked about. The spring, there's a lot going on here, but really a lot of students are getting back some of those final decision letters. Like IU and Purdue, they don't give out decisions until January 15th. Full financial aid packages are coming in, so students can actually see what the actual cost will be for them. Maybe some final visits are taking place. We always want students, once again, to share that information about their acceptances and scholarships with us. So spring is obviously a busy time for seniors, and everyone's kind of be making decisions at different times ultimately. Once again, May 1st is that final decision day that students have, and we always want students to finish strong because every college acceptance, can be rescinded. So we don't want students to fumble the ball at the 1-yard line and mess up. We know senioritis is a real epidemic that strikes every single spring, but at the end of the day, students still have to finish their courses in good standing and earn their diploma so they can move on with the next phase of life. So that was a ton of information in a short amount of time. Obviously, if you have questions, please reach out to me. We'll be doing senior events for parents throughout the fall that are more appropriate for where you are at as a senior parent at that stage. Like I said, we have a dedicated financial late night. Here soon, I'll be meeting with senior parents again to kind of talk about helping your child transition from high school to college. So we try to provide some programming based on where you guys are at in the process. So don't feel like this is the one and only option to get information. If you need to come in for an appointment, we're always happy to do that. So once again, hopefully some of this information was helpful to you all. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything. Thank you.